February 18th, 2007 has been and forever will be the biggest day of my entire life. I was 16 years old at the time, and my best friend had just gotten his first car. We sat around thinking of all of the places we could go and things we could see. His younger brother had recommended that we drive downtown to a local music venue to listen to a couple of bands. Now, we had never heard of the bands before, but that really didn't matter. All we wanted was one night to really feel alive. Just one night free from parents, rules, and responsibilities. So we drove downtown, and surprisingly, the concert was a lot of fun. We were in a room filled with flashing lights and people dancing to loud, blaring music. After the show had ended, we were walking to the car to drive home. My friend's younger brother shouted, "Shotgun!" Now, I was not about to let what had been such an amazing night end in the backseat of a car, so I played him to a game of rock, paper, scissors. My intention was to quickly win the game, climb in the front seat for our drive home. Well, I lost. I lost bad. But thinking quick on my feet, I raced to the front passenger door, climbed inside, locked it, forcing my friend's younger brother to get in the back. It's crazy to think that a game of rock, paper, scissors has forever changed my life. Because on the drive home, my best friend decided to elevate our level of excitement. He decided to keep the fun going. We were approaching a small hill, and he decided to accelerate and do nearly 100 miles an hour over the hill, expecting to shoot down the other side and come soaring down the road. We were surprised, however, when on the other side was a sharp turn wall beneath an overpass. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and when the car collided into the turn wall, my body came flying out. I hit the ground head first, and my lungs stopped taking in air. My comatose body was nearing its final seconds. A woman had saw the accident occur and quickly dialed 911. She raced over to the car and woke my friend up, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Where's Ryan?"
That night I had tried to call Ryan's cell phone and I didn't get an answer, so I felt like something's not right. So I got up, got dressed, and kind of paced around the house. And then shortly after that, we did get a knock on the door, and it was the older brother who said they've been in an accident and I think Ryan's hurt a little bit. And I said, "What do you mean a little bit?" And he said, "Well, he's gone to the trauma center." So I knew at that point when he said the word trauma center that it wasn't good. So I immediately called my friend around the corner who came around to sit with Morgan and Logan, and we immediately took off. I started calling the family and letting everybody know on the way to the hospital that Ryan was in an accident, and we didn't know anything at that point. We pulled up outside of the trauma center. I jumped out of the car, ran through the back door while he went to go park the car, and as I was entering the doors, the paramedics who brought Ryan to the hospital were exiting. And I asked, "Where's my son?" And he just was in an accident. And they said, "Are you the mother of the passenger or the driver?" And I said, "The passenger." And they said, "Oh, come with me." So being a nurse for many years, I knew what the "oh, come with me" meant, especially when they took me to the small, quiet room. And I saw a chaplain sitting there, and I refused to go in the room because from my work experience, I know when we take someone in that room, we're usually going to tell them something that's not going to be good. So I immediately kept asking, "Is he alive? Is he alive?" And they kept saying, "Just wait, someone will be out. Just wait, someone will be out." And I said, "No, I need to know, is he alive? Is he intubated?" And they said, "Well, he is now, but we couldn't get him intubated. He clamped down on the tube. We were unable to get an airway until we reached here to the hospital." So I knew at that point that it wasn't good, and I kept asking questions, and they gave me a little bit of information which I understood what it meant when they said He was posturing on the scene, that he was a GCS of 3. So in my mind, I knew at that point that if he made it, it would be a miracle. But if he did, what would he be like after that? So the main thing at this point was I just wanted to live.
Logan was a little bit too young to really understand or ask. You know, we told him that Ryan was in an accident and had to be at the hospital. So, but he was a little too young to kind of understand what was going on, and that it was easy to tell him that Ryan was hurt and he was going to be in the hospital, and really didn't understand that part. Morgan was a little different. We had to explain to her a little bit differently because we knew she understood what an accident was and that Ryan was hurt and that it was serious. So we kind of had to shield her a little bit more than what we would have with Logan.
Morgan was with, and Logan were with, my friend around the corner, and my friend had called and said that this was the next day, that Morgan was really asking a lot of questions and kept asking, is he going to die? And my friend didn't want to answer that question. She wanted that to come from us and wanted us to be able to tell her what we wanted to. So I asked her, I told her she could bring her up to the waiting room and we would talk to her. So she did bring her up that day, and we told her that we were honest with her and said, this is really bad. Ryan's been in a really bad accident and Ryan could die. And she broke down and she started crying and said, I want to see him, but we were not wanting her to see him yet, because if he did die, I didn't want that to be the last memory that she had. So we talked to the trauma psychologist at the hospital, and she said, let's wait a couple of days, and she will talk to Morgan. She'll show her what she will see and kind of prepare her before we take her in there. So we made her wait a few days, and the trauma psychologist sat down with her and talked with her, and then took her into the room with all of us standing there. And I was sitting by the side of the bed holding Ryan's hand, and she came to the doorway, and when she did, she kind of almost like she couldn't make a step into the room. She was in shock and just scared, and she stopped and just started crying. And I told her she could come over and she could hold his hand, and she kind of eased over a little bit and held his hand, and then broke down crying, and that was all she could handle at that point. I could not lose my son was the only thing that was going through my mind at that point, and I didn't care what they had to do, who had to do it, but that was not an option for me. And in the back of my mind, I knew that was a possibility. And as a mother, you're supposed to be able to protect your children. And at that point, I knew I had no control, and that there was no way that I could protect him from this, that this was out of my hands, that I had no control over this situation. And that's something that I don't like, because I think I've spent all of my life with my kids trying to prevent things from happening, trying to protect them and keep them safe. And when something like this happens, this is something that you can't change. You have to sit and wait, and you are helpless.
I honestly thought I was going back to that private room to tell everybody that Ryan was not going to make it. I thought I was going to be the one to tell the rest of the family that we would be burying Ryan in the next few days.
And from that point, every single day, when we went up to the actual ICU that night, I laid my head on the side of Ryan's bed and just held his hand, and they had already placed an ICP monitor in his brain to measure the pressures. And I was a pediatric nurse, but I didn't know about traumatic brain injuries or what to expect or what to look for. But I knew the number that they didn't want the pressures to go over, and I think I sat there, held his hand, and stared at the monitor all night long, because I never closed my eyes, because I was afraid if I closed my eyes for a moment, if I walked out of the room for a moment, then I may come back and he may not be there.
I'm thankful I made it out of the trauma hospital alive, but I'll never really know what it was like for my friends and family to have to go through what they did. I'll never really know what it's like to walk into a room and stare at your son for what could be the very last time. So I am forever thankful and appreciative for the love and support the medical staff, my friends, and family showed me.
When we left the trauma hospital to go to the inpatient rehab center, Ryan had his eyes open, but that was about it. There was no emotion, no communication. He was unable to walk, talk. He had to be transferred from the bed to the stretcher. And once we arrived at the rehab hospital, he had to be physically picked up and put in a reclining wheelchair. He could not eat. He had to be fed. I had to feed him Boost or Ensure with a syringe. He was unable to bathe himself, toilet himself. It was like taking care of an infant all over again. But I had a 125-pound 16-year-old. He started going through agitation and I had to spend the first 3 to 4 nights laying in the bed, just holding him to keep him from falling out of the bed, pulling his trach out, or hurting himself. The nurse kept asking me if I wanted a net bed, and I kept saying, no, I don't want him to be scared. Finally, after about 3 nights of no sleep, I said, well, try it. But I still had to keep a watch and lean up against the wall because he repeatedly kept trying to pull the trach out, tried to get out of the bed, but he could not understand anything that we said to him.
After completing inpatient rehabilitation, it was time for me to transition to outpatient and slowly be reintegrated into everyday life. It was in outpatient rehabilitation that I was starting to really come back to my senses, and I was starting to see how sticky of a situation I had gotten myself into.
Well, when I was treating Ryan, he was pretty early on in his recovery. And as is typical of most individuals that have an acquired brain injury due to trauma, memory can be quite a challenge for individuals. So we worked a lot on his memory and new learning. His attention and concentration was an area. I think Ryan kind of was a hyper kid before all this happened, and I kind of saw him as a little whirlwind, and he had a hard time to sit down and focus. He was always interested in everything that was going on around him. So I can kind of remember working with him and telling him that I wanted him to just tune out all the distractions. I didn't want him to look up when people walked by. I wanted him to focus and maintain his focus. And that was hard for him because he was so inquisitive. He was interested in everything, so it was difficult for him to focus in on things. One of the most challenging things people have to overcome when they're going through rehabilitation is acceptance of what's happened, and being able to cope with the changes that have happened in their lives and cope with all of the consequences of the changes, because it changes people's lives entirely in many cases. And everything that they define themselves as, everything that they knew themselves to be, can be stripped away in an instant. And to come to terms with that and to have the hope and the courage and the faith to carry on and know that there can be a life again after a brain injury. There's such a tremendous lack of awareness about brain injury and how many individuals suffer from brain injuries. I mean, there's 5.3 million people in the U.S. right now that are living with long-term consequences and disabilities from the injuries. And if you say, for example, ABI or TBI to the average person, they probably don't know what that means, number one, as opposed to MS or Parkinson's or, any autism. People know what that is, but people don't know about brain injury, and it's the leading cause of disability, all others combined, aside from depression. So I think it's so important to tell the story and to tell it in a way that captures each individual and their own story, not as a group, because it's not having a brain injury. A brain injury doesn't exist. There's a million brain injuries in terms of how it affects one's functioning. And it's not one set of results or consequences. It's any combination. And it can be anything and everything. And I think there needs to be a much greater awareness about the silent epidemic, as it's called.
After finishing outpatient rehabilitation, it was time for me to return to everyday life. It was time for me to get back to being a teenager and go back to high school. High school was really overwhelming. Because I had missed a majority of my junior year, I had to take 11th and 12th grade at the same time. Now, coming out of outpatient rehabilitation, I still wasn't 100%. I had a lot of difficulties with organizational skills, time management, mathematics, and processing information. So, taking 2 grades at the same time after coming out of what I had just gone through was really tough. To make things even harder, I had to, get back to social interactions. I had to return to having friends and being around them, and at the same time not coming off as the weirdo or, trying my best to act and feel normal. There were a lot of times I felt like an outsider, and I felt like I was ostracized from everyone I knew. I felt alone and stranded. I felt like everybody saw what was wrong with me. I felt worthless. I was really ashamed of myself and my story. I tried my best each and every day to just act as if nothing had happened to me. I tried to hide my scars, and I didn't really like sharing my story.
Which she had struggled to keep things together as it was before the accident, so going back and doing both, learning the math and things like that, I had to help him a lot. I had to have him come out, and we'd sit down and do hours of math homework and go over it and over it and over it until he would get it. But he kept on and kept on.
When Ryan went back to school, that was a whole another challenge. We have faced many along the way, but that was a different kind of animal, because now Ryan is trying to figure out, where does he fit in the world? Where does he fit in at school? Who is he now? And that was difficult, because he's not the same Ryan that he was just a few months ago before this accident. All of those people and friends that were there for the most part had all kind of started dissipating and kind of migrating away from Ryan. So not only was Ryan trying to keep up with 11th and 12th grade, but he was also trying to find those friends again and being forced to face society, which could be cruel and was cruel.
After Ryan's accident, it was difficult to see the struggles that he went through, especially with friends and not really fitting in and feeling left out and different.
Graduating high school was a big moment for me. It was something that a lot of people thought I would never do. So for my family to see me walk across that stage and grab my high school diploma was a really special moment. It was soon after graduating high school that I wanted to continue on with my education and pursue college. Now, I had a counselor in college that helped to make sure that college was going to be feasible and that I was going to be able to, take courses, have accommodations to help me get through some of my difficulties. And I'll never forget a conversation I had with her one time when she asked me what it is I wanted to major in. She asked me what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And college had really opened me up to all of the possibilities, and when I began telling her all of these, grand things I wanted to be, I told her I wanted to go get a master's degree and, become a psychologist that can help other people that have gone through something similar to what I have. She told me that I need to be a little bit more realistic. She told me that I need to understand that I have a brain injury and that things aren't going to be as easy as they are for everyone else. She told me to pick something a little bit more manageable. It's things like that drove me to challenge myself and prove her and everyone wrong. I never let my brain injury hold me back, and I wasn't going to let it start in college. So I went through college, and I took courses in different types of studies just to see what really interested me the most. Every day I wanted to be something different. I went from wanting to go to medical school and be a doctor to being a dentist or a lawyer, and there was one thing that remained consistent all throughout college, and that was that I began sharing my story. What once was a shameful, embarrassing thing to tell people about was starting to become, a big driver behind all that I did. I would share my story with people, and they would congratulate me on my recovery and be surprised that somebody who seemed to be so normal had such a big story. So I began being proud to share my story, and it actually did a lot of great things. There were times I would talk to people who maybe weren't making the right decisions in their own life, and I would share my story and talk about some of the ways I overcame the challenges that I faced. It was really inspiring to see these people, change the way that they're living their life and better themselves. And that became addicting to me. It became so fulfilling to share my story with others and watch them live a better life. It helped me realize that that's what I want to do. That is what I want to do the rest of my life, help other people. I'll never forget riding in the car, and we were talking about my story, and I gripped the steering wheel and I said, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I said, I want to write a book to continue sharing my story in a much larger kind of way. And I wanted to bring hope to families that are currently going through some hard times. When I finished writing Second Chance, it was a feeling I can't describe. It was a way for me to really get on paper what it's like to live with a traumatic brain injury, what it's like to, put your family through something like that. What it's like to think about your future, knowing all of the hardships of your past. It was a really eye-opening experience. And when I published my book, I had readers contact me and say, thank you for telling people what it's like to live with a brain injury, or thank you for giving my family hope. And it's moments like that that made it all worth it. I hoped that my book would just inspire others to really live out their second chance and make the best of their own life. I wanted to give families hope that it's never the end until it's the end, and that everybody can bounce back from hardships in their life and still find happiness and find success. I would get feedback from readers that I knew and didn't know saying like, hey, I just finished your book, thank you for telling other people what it's like to live with a brain injury. Thank you for telling other people what it's like for families to have to go through something like this. And it was moments like that that made it all worth it. I realized that my book was helping people, but I wanted more. I wanted to continue helping other people in a much larger kind of way. I wanted to take the success I had writing Second Chance and multiply it. I wanted to really help other people in the same kind of way that I helped myself. I never let my brain injury stop me from accomplishing any of my goals. And I want others to feel the same way. I want to help people realize that their story is a tool. It's a tool that can be used to really, drive them to take on the world and do great things for themselves and for others. When I had first decided that I wanted to start a nonprofit organization, I spent months thinking of, what could I do for others? it was a mind-boggling time where I didn't really have a master's or PhD degree. I couldn't provide professional services to people living with a brain injury, and so I continued to ask myself, like, what can I do? What can I do to continue making an impact in my community? And it finally hit me one day. I realized that I could help people in the same way that I help myself.
When I found out he was trying to make a nonprofit, I didn't really understand what it meant, but I knew he wanted to help people and others.
And when he told me that he was going to start a nonprofit and do documentaries about individual stories, that's what needs to be told. I mean, the educational videos on brain injury, they don't capture it. The stories need to be told about each person. And I think that will change lives. I think that will educate people about the uniqueness of this injury and about the need to have more supports, long-term supports, and more services, because people will get better. But they're only going to get better if they have supports, family supports, and supports as it relates to restoring and getting back the skills that they once had. Now, it's true that every person is not going to make 100% recovery, but if you put a person in an isolated box and you think that that person is going to be able to get better, it doesn't happen that way. They have got to be out and engaged in activity, things that are meaningful, with people that care about them, and have a life. You can't get better if you have no life. It's kind of like if you put a baby in a dark room and gave it no activity or stimulation, well, that baby's not going to develop. And it's the same after somebody's had an injury. In order for them to develop and grow and continue to recover, they need that. And I think Ryan's Second Chance story will help promote the need for more services to help individuals who have gone through life-changing catastrophic brain injuries.
Sharing my story has been a tool for me. It's driven me to take on everything that I've set my mind to. It's helped me accomplish all of the goals that I've set for myself. Every morning I wake up and realize that I'm living my second chance and that I'd better make something of it. And I want other people to feel empowered by their story. I want other people living with a brain injury to take the tragic experience they've had in their life and let it be the driving factor behind the great things they do going forward. I want to give people the opportunity to better their lives and the lives of others with their second chance. There are a lot of people in this world that have inspiring stories that need to be shared. I'm really excited for Second Chance Story to help these individuals share their story with the community. I want people to realize that living with a brain injury doesn't mean you're incapable or broken. Living with a brain injury just means that you have a powerful story that can do great things in your life and in the lives of others. Second Chance Story is truly going to do great things for our community, and I'm so excited to see where it goes. I cannot wait to meet individuals, hear their stories, hear how they overcame some of the difficulties they faced in their tragic event, and help them share that with other people that maybe are going through the same thing. I always tell people that I want to dedicate the rest of my entire life to helping others, and this is exactly how I plan to do that. My name is Ryan, and this is my second chance.